Actually, what happened was William Camden, who started his account when Elizabeth was still alive, actually went back and rewrote it on James's orders once James was King of England, and he rewrote it in James's favour because by then James was deeply unpopular in England. He was clinging to power by his fingertips.
Good morning, Tracy. Thank you so much for doing this.
Morning, Rod. It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's a great story, lovely story for us to do.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, absolutely.
well, let us get into it. I'd always been of the opinion that the accession of James I to the English throne, James VI as he was a totally smooth and preordained thing. Is this not true?
That's because that's what he wanted us to think. And in some respects, it was smooth, but that was only thanks to an awful lot of work going on behind the scenes. And what we've been told for 400 years is that almost with her dying breath, Elizabeth I named James as her heir. This is something she'd resisted throughout her 44-year reign to actually nominate her successor. But as she lay dying, according to the earliest accounts of this by William Camden, she said, "I will have none but the King of Scots. He will be the next king." But that account by William Camden has now been shown to be fake news, I think we would call it, because the British Library has done a lot of analysis on the original manuscript and discovered there's lots of pastings over and crossings out. And actually, what happened was William Camden, who started his account when Elizabeth was still alive, actually went back and rewrote it on James's orders once James was King of England, and he rewrote it in James's favour because by then James was deeply unpopular in England. He was clinging to power by his fingertips. There's been the gunpowder plot, and so it was all falling apart. So he needed to sort of put words in the late Queen's mouth and make it look like he was absolutely supposed to be her successor. So it's really quite earth-shattering as historical discoveries go. It changes everything we thought we knew about this smooth transfer of power from the Tudors to the Stuarts.
But does it? Does it? Does the simple fact that the Camden's encomiums may well have been rewritten and given a positive spin, as we might put it today, by James I, does it necessarily negate the fact that it was a smooth transition and he was the one who was wanted? Because we know that between 1601 and 1603, when Elizabeth was ailing, that there was intense diplomatic efforts between Robert Cecil, for
Yes.
example, and James to prepare the way for his accession to the throne.
Yeah.
Was Robert Cecil not doing that?
No, you're absolutely right. He was. And actually, I would say James largely owed his crown to Robert Cecil and this very powerful minister who was smoothing the way, as you said, for James's accession. But what Elizabeth wanted may have been a different matter. Now, the chances are she saw James as the best of a bad lot, but there were at least 12 other potential successors to her crown. And what my new book does is to look at those afresh because I'm guilty of this as well. We've relied on William Camden's account and seen it as a foregone conclusion that the Stuarts succeeded the Tudors. But actually, when you strip that away, you realize how easily one of the other claimants could have pipped James to the post. And I'm thinking of the likes of Arbella Stuart, his cousin, who also was of Scottish descent, but she was born in England. And this was a time when Scotland was seen as a foreign country by most Englishmen. And so Arbella had a lot of support, as did even, a Spanish princess, Isabella, daughter of Philip II of Spain. She had a huge amount of support and could have had a Spanish army as backup.
Yeah.
So it sort of it's been fascinating to explore the what if, I suppose. And the fact is, James, he did win the race. He did have the strongest blood claim, but actually, technically, his accession was illegal because it went against the terms of Henry VIII's will against his acts of succession, Henry VIII, Elizabeth's father, was utterly determined that no Scot would ever sit on his throne. But Elizabeth kind of turned a bit of a blind eye to that. And I think probably James was her favourite, but she still wasn't all that happy about the fact that he might succeed her.
We might say it's just as well, mightn't we? Because actually, James didn't do a bad job as monarch of the two countries.
I
Uh,
think
and
in his own sorry, I think in his own reign, James managed to hold on to power, but it was a close run thing. There were rebellions very early in his reign, and he really sowed the seeds of serious trouble in the next reign. I would argue that actually the sort of lie that started the Stuart dynasty in England would have devastating consequences for the monarchy, because throughout their long correspondence, Elizabeth had been trying to sort of shape James into a future king of England, but he disregarded all of her advice. And so he did things his way, and his way was all about the divine right of kings and disregarding Parliament. And that caused trouble for James himself, but it really caused trouble for his son Charles, who was a king in the mold of his father. And of course, Charles was overthrown by his
yes,
parliament ultimately and lost his head. So it's astonishing, in the space of less than 50 years of Elizabeth's death, the monarchy was over. And just looking at what led to that seismic event, I think it did start with this sort of unlawful succession, and the fact that James just wasn't going to bend to the English way of doing things.
and does that mean that we can forget about Scotland then, that the union should never have taken place?
Well, James was the one who wanted it to take place very much, and that this was his first big clash with Parliament, in that he thought it would be easy, because of course it was in his eyes. He's king of both countries. Let's have a united kingdom, but nobody wanted it on either side of the border. And so that was a real wake-up call, I think, for James, that the English Parliament wasn't going to be quite so amenable as the Scottish. But he sort of forged ahead anyway. He designed a Union Jack flag and the a new coinage called the Unite. But really, it was a fairly sort of empty gesture, and he found Parliament very, very opposed to the idea. And in fact, the formal union of the two crowns didn't happen until over 100 years later with Queen Anne.
Indeed. Tracy Borman, thank you ever so much for talking to us. That's terrific stuff. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank